you know? So much trouble in the world, you know? Sometimes you gotta realize life isn't all about, you know, these troubling times that we living in. You gotta stay free from it, you know? Because at the end of the day, everyone is in a spiritual battle, you know? We're all in a spiritual battle, y'all. That's right. We're all in a spiritual battle. Life is really what you make it in Christ. Notice I said in Christ because most people don't understand truth and wisdom. So at the end of the day, we are the light of the world and we must act as such. So for most of you out here that is living a life of, I would say, you know, constant prosecution and constant buffoonery of who you are, I would say don't be in argument with anyone during these last days much as you can. Try not to be. Because there's a lot of folks out here trying to spiritually drain people. I don't know if y'all are feeling that out there. You know, a lot of spiritual drainers out there, you know. Try not to be in the wrong alignment. You know. Because at the end of the day, we're the original people. We're the original owners of the land. So we ain't here for no disalignment and these people that don't have no clue what the hell they're doing. Their entire portfolio, their entire media, their entire life is a goddamn media where they just propagating a whole lot of garbage. So we got a story right here with my girl, Panagenius, my sister. She's always about the truth. So we go ahead and like that. Make sure y'all subscribe to MVTV as well. Subscribe to Panagenius TV. We covering stories that matters to us. So we can better put it into perspectives. And we can better have a way to actualize what it is we're trying to do with MeFlix. MeFlix is my experience. That's right, y'all. We want y'all to be part of our story making process. We want you guys to be part of the Black experience. For many of you that's watching, I'm going to play what I showed just now. But we got to internalize the stories that matter to us in these days so we can actualize how we can build our communities in a safer manner. So let's go. Let's see what my sister got to say about what the president of Ghana, John Mahama, says in regards to Donald Trump and his so-called South Africa Wahala that he says was a white genocide. Well, there is no such thing as a whitey genocide yet. But there has been a black genocide. There's been many, especially since slavery, Deuteronomy 28. Let's go ahead.
It's one of the bravest,
let's play this.
boldest, and yes, most necessary moves we've seen from an African leader in a long time. In a moment where silence would have been easier, where diplomacy could have demanded distance, he chose solidarity. He stood up, he spoke out, and he did it not for political points, not for applause, but for the truth. In an op-ed published by The Guardian, The president of Ghana took aim directly at Donald Trump's reckless, racist claims of white genocide in South Africa. He defended a fellow African nation on the world stage. He reminded the world of our history and refused to let it be rewritten. And in doing so, he modeled what real Pan-African leadership looks like. Unapologetic, unbucked, and yes, unafraid. Because when one of us is being gaslit at the White House, we all feel the heat. And Mahama said, not this time.
I couldn't afford a team, but I don't win anyway. Look, I used to be that founder doing everything.
Sounds good, but let's skip this ad. So basically what we have to do is just skip and then go back on.
Today on The Breakdown, we're unpacking the full message behind his powerful
We keep it simple, y'all.
The history he invoked, and why this moment, the act of public defiance against U.S. narrative control, is bigger than South Africa. It's about all of us. We're gonna break it down, but before we dive in, a big welcome to all of our new subscribers and members. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're watching and haven't joined us yet, please consider this your personal invitation. Because here at Pan-Genius TV, we're not just building a channel, but we're creating a global home for Black stories that are told with truth, with intention, and with power. And so if that speaks to you, and I hope it does, hit subscribe, tap the bell, drop a super thanks, and consider joining our membership community where we go beyond the headlines.
That's right.
All right, now let's get into it. So we're gonna go through President Mahama's op-ed, section by section.
MVTV.
You already know what time it is. We're gonna break it all the way down.
Piggyback.
I want you to stay with me to the very end, because this isn't just about what he said. It's about the symbolism of what he did. And I really want to hear your thoughts on that, because this moment is bigger than politics. It's about leadership, legacy, and standing up when it matters most. Let's go. Mahama starts off. The meeting at the White House between Donald Trump and the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa was, at its heart, about the preservation of essential historical truths. The U.S. President's claims of white genocide conflict with the actual racial persecution and massacres that took place during the 2 centuries of colonization and nearly 50 years of apartheid in South Africa. So what he's telling us here is, no, this wasn't just about a meeting, right? This was about memory, about facts, about narrative, about who gets to tell the story and who gets erased from it. He continues, it is not enough to be affronted by these claims or to casually dismiss them as untruths. These statements are a clear example of how language can be leveraged to extend the effects of previous injustices. This mode of violence has long been used against indigenous Africans, and it cannot simply be met with silence. Not anymore.
That's right.
So Mahama is calling out the meeting for what it really was, a dangerous attempt to rewrite history. Trump's claim of so-called white genocide in South Africa didn't just offend the truth, it reversed it. Because let's be clear, it wasn't white South Africans who were massacred under apartheid. It was Black South Africans who were dispossessed, who were murdered, who were systematically excluded from land, capital, and power under nearly 2 centuries of colonization, followed by 5 decades of apartheid brutality. So when Trump stands on a global stage and claims white genocide, he's not just wrong, he's using language as a weapon that distorts justice, a weapon that extends the trauma of colonization into the present.
He's a true Satan.
And Mahama gives us the real warning. This isn't just misinformation, it's strategic disinformation. It's a continuation of the same colonial playbook. Flip the script, cast the oppressor as the victim, and silence the voices of those still fighting for repair.
The oppressor is done.
Mahama says plainly,
Forever.
it cannot be met with silence, not anymore. Because silence is complicity. Let's continue. The Kenyan writer, Mzee Ngugi wa Thiong'o, wrote, Language conquest, unlike the military form, wherein the victor must subdue the whole population directly, is cheaper and more effective. Whew, let that sink in. Because that's...
Sister, they lucky we giving them a time to talk, or even come to the table, or even have any conversation with us. Because this time around, ain't no conversation. Just massive caterpillar destruction.
Quote from the legendary Kenyan writer and anti-colonial thinker, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, it's not just poetic, it's prophetic. See, colonialism didn't end when the last British or Dutch soldier left African soil. They just changed uniforms. The new battlefield, language, narrative, media. The stories were told, and the stories were taught to believe. And here's the trick. You don't have to drop bombs when you can drop myths. You don't need to occupy land when you can occupy minds. When Trump claims white genocide, he's not just spreading a lie, he's seeding fear globally. He's reprogramming public perception to view the historically oppressed as the new threat. That's not just ignorance, that's ideological warfare. And as Ngugi warned, that kind of warfare is cheaper, more scalable, and often more damaging than tanks and guns. Because when a false narrative takes hold, when you distort history just enough, it reshapes policy, it shifts sympathy, it redirects power. And suddenly, victims of systemic violence are being asked to prove their innocence, to justify their very presence, to rewrite their pain into something more palatable.
That's what they're trying to do. So to keep it simple, she's saying they're trying to make us feel like you can't protect yourself. Just like a cop that called me about a fight that almost happened somewhere. I was protecting myself because somebody was trying to attack me. You telling me I gotta be under arrest? You crazy? I told the cop, I'll put you under arrest. How dare you? You ever try to tell me that shit, I will shut your whole entire operation down.
Ringing the alarm.
Tell me that shit.
This isn't a semantic debate. It's a struggle for sovereignty. Because if we lose control of the narrative, we lose control of the future. Let's continue.
Because they have access to our information.
And are tired of prices rising while your income stays the same. Listen up.
They're tired of our information. They have access to our information. And this is why we got to understand that we got to start showing them we have access to their information. Giving them a call. Threatening them with arrest and whatnot. Just so they can understand this information. Because if you want to play a game, you got to understand what kind of game you want to play.
Just launched a new
Because this game that these people want to play is a clown game. And by the time you realize it, the whole system has failed and is falling because of their foolish natures. So let's go ahead. Let's continue.
African nations learned long ago that their fates are inextricably linked. When it comes to interactions with the world beyond our continent, we are each other's bellwether. In 1957, the year before my birth, Ghana became the first Black African country to free itself from colonialism. After the Union Jack had been lowered, our first Prime Minister, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, gave a speech in which he emphasized that our independence is meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of Africa. Shortly after that, in 1960, was the Sharpeville massacre in South Africa, which resulted in 69 deaths and more than 100 wounded. In Ghana, thousands of miles away, we marched, we protested, we gave cover and shelter. A similar solidarity existed in sovereign nations across the continent. Why? Because people who looked like us were being subjugated, treated as second-class citizens on their own ancestral land. We had fought our own versions of that same battle.
And we will
Now let's pause here,
overturn
that's loaded.
everything.
When President Muhammad says,
Inside their
we
land.
are each other's
So-called
bellwether,
taking land.
he's not just being poetic, he's naming a Pan-African truth. Because in Africa, and I often say this here on the show, no country struggles in isolation, and no victory is ever truly local. From Ghana's independence in 1957 to the Sharpeville massacre in South Africa just 3 years later, the thread of solidarity has always run deep. When Sharpeville happened, when 69 Black South Africans were gunned down for demanding their dignity, Ghanaians marched, they protested, they opened their homes, and they weren't alone. Across the continent, newly independent nations stood up, not just in sympathy, but in solidarity, because they understood something that still rings true today. Oppression anywhere on the continent is a threat to freedom everywhere
Everywhere.
on the continent.
That's right.
As Mahama reminds us, Kwame Nkrumah, on the very day Ghana gained independence, declared, quote, our independence is meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of Africa. That's not just rhetoric, that's a mandate. And it's why today, when South Africa is being gaslit on the world stage, when its leadership is being pressured into concessions that undermine its own equity laws, the rest of the continent must not stay silent. Because the moment we start believing that our fates aren't connected, that's when we lose the very foundation Pan-Africanism was built on. Mahama continues, I was 17 in June 1976 when the South African Soweto uprising took place. The now iconic photo of a young man in Mbuyisa Makubo carrying the limp 12-year-old body of Hector Peterson, who had just been shot by the police, haunted me for years. It so deeply hurt me to think that I was free to dream of a future, as this child was making the ultimate sacrifice for the freedom and future of his people. Hundreds of children were killed in that protest alone. It is their blood and the blood of their forebears that nourishes the soul of South Africa. The racial persecution of Black South Africans was rooted in a system that was enshrined in law. It took worldwide participation through demonstrations, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions to end apartheid so that all South Africans, regardless of skin color, would be considered equal. Nevertheless, the effects of centuries-long oppression do not just disappear with the stroke of a pen, particularly when there has been no cogent plan of reparative justice. Let's pause. Mahama takes us to June 1976, when a 17-year-old Mahama, still full of dreams, was confronted with an image that would haunt a generation. That's the photo he's referring to. The body of 12-year-old Hector Peterson, carried by a grief-stricken teenager through the chaos of the Soweto uprising, after being shot by apartheid police for daring to speak his own language. That image wasn't just tragic, it was transformative, because it forced the world to look and reminded people like Mahama and millions more that freedom in one part of Africa meant little while children were dying in another. This wasn't some spontaneous outburst of violence. It was the predictable outcome of a system, a legally enshrined, violently enforced racial hierarchy that treated Black lives as expendable. And here's where Mahama hits hard again. Even after the laws were repealed, the damage didn't just vanish. Yes, apartheid officially ended, but the economic structures, the social inequalities, and unhealed wounds, they remained. Because, as he puts it, there has been no cogent plan for reparative justice, no reckoning, no redistribution, just the illusion of equality, while the foundations of injustice were quietly left intact. So when Trump now speaks of white genocide as if white South Africans are somehow the victims of modern-day persecution, it's not just offensive, it's historically dishonest.
It's disrespectful.
and more
It's
dangerously,
blatantly disrespectful, and he needs to be
legitimizing the very
taken
system
down
so many died to dismantle.
immediately
He
without
continues,
any understanding.
despite making up less than 10% of the population,
Entire
white South Africans
nations.
control more than 70% of the nation's wealth. Even now, there are few places in South Africa where only Afrikaners are permitted to own property, live, and work. At the entrance to one such settlement, Kleinfontein, is an enormous bust of Hendrik Verwoerd, the former prime minister who is considered the architect of apartheid. Another separatist town, Orania, teaches only Afrikaans in its schools, has its own chamber of commerce, as well as its own currency, the Ora, that is used strictly within its borders. It has been reported that inside the Oranian Cultural History Museum, there is a bust of every apartheid-era president, except F.W. de Klerk, who initiated reforms that led to the repeal of apartheid laws. Both Kleinfontein and Orania are currently in existence, and they boast a peaceful lifestyle. Why had the America-bound Afrikaners not sought refuge in either of those places? Had the Black South Africans wanted to exact revenge on Afrikaners, surely they would have done so decades ago when the pain of their previous circumstances was still fresh in their minds. What, at this point, is there to be gained by viciously killing and persecuting people you'd long ago forgiven?
Why are thousands of Canadians banking $35,000 a
This
month
is crazy.
while you're stuck paying Trudeau's tax?
Well, we're about to end it right there. We don't need more propaganda. We don't need more popular persuasion. What we need is total autonomy. What we need is total autonomy. We're tired of this living under these people's understanding of economics and understanding of the monetary system. We need a total end to this immediately so they can go off somewhere and go into perdition, and we can understand our glory of our Lord. Prophecy is next. So don't you worry, my people. Be strong, stay strong, and let's finish the fight, because it's almost over, y'all. Don't you worry. It's almost over. Be the first, lead board, whatever it is. Top fan. It's almost over. Thank you.